and welcome to Reading with Serge. Today, I'll be reading a book by Hamilton Jordon, No Such Thing as a Bad Day. It's a New York Times bestseller. Something worth noting, I guess. And we'll get right into it with the foreword. The fascinating journey detailed in these pages will arouse the interest of every reader. Imagine an author who survived attacks from 3 different kinds of cancer and is able to describe these experiences with courage and good humor. Imagine that this same young man, a quarter of a century ago, at the age of 27, analyzed one of the most complicated and daunting political challenges in American history and planned the basic strategy for a campaign that brought an unknown Georgia governor into the White House. As a young Southerner, Hamilton Jordon's personal tribulations while serving as White House Chief of Staff are the stuff of which fiction is ordinarily made. These challenges took a bizarre and damaging life of their own when Hamilton was faced with a barrage of false accusations from men who lied in order to reduce their own prison sentences. As a boy, Hamilton saw his uncle Clarence Jordon become the founder of a racially integrated farm in the deep South, Georgia, in the 1940s. Excuse me. I'll get the hang of this. He witnessed the intense hatred that this aroused among the Ku Klux Klansmen, whose bombs, fires, and bullets did not deter Clarence Jordon from demonstrating his Christian faith in action. 15 years later, Hamilton was on the scene when Martin Luther King Jr. began his early civil rights marches in Albany, Georgia. During the Vietnam conflict, the author volunteered to serve, but when he was physically disqualified for combat, went there on a humanitarian mission. Instead of Viet Cong, his unsuspected adversary turned out to be Agent Orange, an almost fatal encounter he later described to Admiral Elmo Zumwalt, whose order to use the chemical herbicide resulted in the death of his own son. In summary, this is an astonishing collection of adventures and observations woven into a dramatic account that helps to clarify some of the mysteries of our nation's recent history. But above all, Hamilton Jordon's book provides reassurance for cancer patients and members of every family who face the challenge of this disease. I'm gonna stop stuttering. Just I'm about to start, Let me get warmed up. Hamilton's story offers a rare combination of insight, wry humor, and real inspiration. Jimmy Carter, Plains, Georgia. Nice. Let's get into it. See what they talking about. Dedication. This book is dedicated with love and admiration to Catherine Jordon, my 11-year-old daughter, whose courage, joy, and spirit in dealing with a chronic disease inspires me and all who are fortunate to know her. Her mother, her 2 brothers, Hamilton Jr. and Alexander, and I are very proud of her and grateful to her for her example. Right. Table of contents, part 1, part 2, part 1. First time around. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was lying in my hospital bed. My doctor had just left to review the tissue report with the pathologist. He promised to come back within the hour. I had been in the hospital now for 5 days and had every test in the book. And it all came down to a person sitting in a laboratory somewhere peering into a microscope at my cells and deciding what kind of cancer I had and whether I would live or die. Would it be curable or even treatable? Would I have a fighting chance or be left to hope for a miracle? Racing around the world to offbeat clinics searching for a cure? My dear mother and sister made small talk to pass the time. A nurse's aide brought in a form for me to fill out, evaluating the hospital services. Have you enjoyed your stay, Mr. Jordon? She asked. I'll tell you in an hour, I joked. She didn't understand. I found myself knotting up the bed sheets in my hand. The emotional mask that I had been wearing for my family's sake was close to being shattered. Just to escape, I turned on the television and surfed from channel to channel, hoping to be distracted. And I was startled to see a picture of myself on the local CBS affiliate. I turned the volume up in time to hear. CBS has learned that former Carter aide Hamilton Jordon is in an Atlanta hospital and has been diagnosed with inoperable lung cancer. Panic gripped my body as I looked at an old photo of myself on the television screen, and these strange words sunk in. Damn. My mother's face dropped, and my sister watched me closely for a reaction. Then logic returned. If my doctor, who just left my room, didn't know what I had, how in the hell did CBS News know? Like so many other times, the media had only half the story right. That's a fact. That's a fact. The panic caused by the news report subsided as we continued to wait. Suddenly, my room was flooded with doctors. The oncologist, my pulmonary specialist, the radiologist. I tried to read them like a jury. One was smiling slightly, the others were not. What did it all mean? The radiologist broke the ice. Hamilton, when more than one doctor comes into your room, it's usually pretty good news. All I ever wanted was a fighting chance. Well, Mr. Jordon, my lead doctor said, you certainly have that. He paused, glanced down at a written report, and looked up. You have a diffuse, bear with me, histiocytic lymphoma. 10 years ago, this would have been a death sentence, but this is an area where we have made progress. There are a number of treatments that are reasonably effective in dealing with this disease. I stuck on one word. Reasonably, doctor? What does that mean? This is one of those good news, bad news situations. The bad news is that you have a very aggressive cancer. The good news is that aggressive cancers divide rapidly, which means that they are particularly vulnerable to chemotherapy and radiation at the time of cell division. We've got to find a treatment your cancer will respond to. He went on to tell me that I would need to undergo further tests, but that the evidence at this point was that the cancer was confined to my chest area. We plan to radiate your chest. The bottom line is that we have a good shot at curing this. That was too vague, and I learned for the first of many times that cancer patients should only ask questions if they are prepared to hear the answer. What's a good shot, doctor? Well, every patient is different. Just quantify it for me, I interrupted. I don't like to use numbers, Mr. Jordon, but if you insist. I do, I said firmly. About half of the patients who have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma would achieve a remission with the therapy we will give you. Half of those will be free of the disease 5 years out. I was doing the math in my head, so overall I have about a 25% chance of being in the group that obtains remission and is cancer-free 5 years later. That's about right, Mr. Jordon. I was devastated to hear my chances of being alive reduced to statistics. But I had asked for it, and from that point on, I insisted that doctors avoid vague terms and quantify my situation. When the stats were favorable, I believed them and clung to them. When they were discouraging, I either tossed them aside or made up my mind to be one of those who beat the odds. But when the doctors left my room that afternoon, I was faced with the cold, harsh fact that the odds greatly favored the cancer winning this battle, not me. I didn't sleep much that night. That's pretty... man. I feel for homie. Yeah, I couldn't even imagine. I can. I mean, it's right here, so it's pretty easy to imagine. But I couldn't imagine myself being in that position. Oh, Imagine the mental strain and emotional strain that it has on the person. All right, back to reading. The story had actually begun on August 24th, 1985, a day frozen forever in my memory. I knew something was wrong when my family doctor sent me to the hospital for an annual chest x-ray, which he had routinely taken in his office for 15 years. A couple of hours later, as we sat in his office, he talked quietly on the phone to the radiologist. I strained to hear, but all I could make out was, "I understand. Yes, I understand." He hung up the phone, turned away as if to avoid contact, slid the x-rays out of the large brown envelope, turned them upright, one by one, and lined them up on the illuminated viewer. What had taken him seconds seemed like hours. He took a deep breath, pointed with his fingers to a smoky area on the film, and said slowly, "Hamilton, I hate to tell you this, but you have an abnormal chest film." He paused to watch me as his words sunk in. "This spot here is some kind of mass, some kind of growth." "Could it be a cancerous growth?" I asked quietly. "Yes," he said so slowly, picking his words carefully. "And most likely it is a cancerous growth, but we will not know for sure until we take a biopsy." I was stunned and just sat there, staring at the film. I felt like someone had suddenly pulled a plug, and all the energy and feeling were flowing from my body. I had a surreal sense of standing apart from this bizarre scene and watching myself sitting in the examination room, talking with my doctor friend, asking predictable questions. Do we know for sure it's cancer? What kind of cancers will grow in that area? What can I do? Will I live? After he had repeated 6 or 8 times, "We don't know any more until we do the biopsy," I stopped asking questions and was ready to go home. Dun dun dun. Next page. My doctor kindly offered to drive me home so that he could tell Dorothy, my wife. I thanked him, but said that I wanted to be alone. I was barely out of the parking lot when Dorothy called on the car phone to report something cute our 18-month-old son, Hamilton Jr., had said. Later, he would tell me that he had sensed something different, that she had sensed something different in my voice. "What's wrong?" she asked. This was not the way to tell her, I thought. I needed to be able to hold her in my arms, comfort her, and be comforted. But I couldn't hold back. I needed her to know and simply blurted out. "Richard found a mass in my chest and thinks it's cancer." Dorothy was shattered. She tried to be strong and brave for me, but I could feel fear oozing out of her every pore. For the first time of many years, I realized it is often more difficult to be the loved one than the cancer patient. I would never forget taking Hamilton Jr. for a walk in his stroller. That same afternoon, I welcomed getting away from the house and from Dorothy and having time to think. But I could only think about him. I stopped, picked him up, and hugged him as I cried softly so as to not scare him. Would I live to see his 2nd birthday? Or his 3rd? I fought back tears every time. I looked at him and was thankful he did not understand that something bad was going on with his Dada. Dada said. Dorothy and I spent the evening on the phone, alerting family and friends. These were terrible calls to make. Everyone tried to be optimistic and struggled to say the right thing. "Maybe it's just a virus you caught in Vietnam," offered my mother, who was battling lung cancer herself. "It could be benign," my sister suggested. "You hear about mistaken x-rays all the time," a close friend said. While my family was filled with wishful thinking, I chose to look at it differently. This was definitely serious, probably cancerous, and the big question was whether or not it was curable. I started off thinking that my chances was not very good. While my family were hoping and praying for a tropical disease and mistaken readings of my film, I checked into the hospital the next morning for a complete battery of tests. It would take a couple of days. I resolved to be brave for my family. If I fell apart, I would be no good for myself or for them. I hid my very real fears and spent the next several days cracking jokes and trying to make the best of a miserable situation. While I was waiting for the report from the biopsy, a friend who happened to be a professional counselor stuck her head through the window. "In the mood for some company?" "You bet. Am I glad to see you, I replied. She sat down on the side of the bed, grasped my hand, and fighting back tears said, I have been thinking about you and praying for you. Not corona. My first thought was that she was going to have to pull herself together before she could help me. I appreciate your prayers, but right now, I would gladly trade them for some advice on how to get my head straight. Sorry, long day. I would gladly trade them for some advice on how to get my head straight. We've been on a roller coaster, and I have to settle down and live with this thing, whatever it is. Hamilton, the best thing you can do is to understand the various stages people go through when confronting a serious illness. I nodded. That made sense. She continued, most people deny their illness initially. They hope that they will wake up the next morning from a bad dream. They refuse to face reality by denying reality. The second stage is usually anger, she continued. People get mad at the world, at their family members, themselves, and at God. They ask, why me? What have I done to deserve this? Next, people usually bargain with God by making a promise that they will do something worthwhile with their lives if they are allowed to live. Finally, patients become depressed, but out of that feeling of despair, people ultimately face the reality. This is acceptance, when a person puts aside his anger and denial, looks squarely at his problem, accepts and deals with it. Look, I said, I'm not trying to be different, and maybe I am just hiding my real feelings. But what you describe is not the way I feel. Denial? Deny what? I've got a mass in my chest the size of an apple. I've seen it on an x-ray. No, it's there, so there's no use in denying it. Angry? At whom? I have lived a great life and have been blessed with much more than I deserve. I don't want to die, but if I died tomorrow, I wouldn't have much room to complain. I don't know why me. But why not me? Maybe God gave me this disease because he thinks that I'm strong enough to handle it. Bargaining with God, I continued. The God that I believe in has all the cards. I don't think that God has to sit down and negotiate with his creations. What I am supposed to do? Say that out. What am I supposed to do? Say that I will be a television evangelist if I'm cured? She smiled. I don't know if I want to be cured that badly, I added with a grin. Hamilton, you have totally blown my theory, and obviously, you have already accepted the reality of your disease. Is that okay, I asked. It's terrific, she said, as she bent over and gave me a big hug. It's terrific. How far are we gonna read? Been on this for 18 minutes. I think this is a good place to stop for my first video, right? Hope you guys enjoy my reading. Pardon my mistakes as I read, and my stuttering, and my misread words, but I think I did a fairly good job. Please give a comment. I promise the quality of the videos will get better as I go. I think I'm gonna have to buy a mic and a camera, like make this seem a little bit more legitimate, right? But either way, I'll continue reading from this same book. It's pretty fucking sad. Damn. Mr. Hamilton's a real warrior, man. A really strong mind this man has. But yeah, we'll continue reading this tomorrow. You guys have a good night, good day, whatever time you guys happen to pass by this video. That's it. Peace.